hello, Texas Value supporters. My name is Mary Elizabeth Castle, and I'm the Director of Government Relations for Texas Values. And welcome to the Texas Values Report. Before we get started, if you're watching on Facebook, be sure to like and share this Facebook post. And of course, if you're listening to it later on a podcast or even on our YouTube page, be sure to give a positive rating of our show today. We have a very exciting show today because as you've been paying attention to the national news and the state news even, you know that a lot of things are going crazy with the gender identity movement to the point that it's even trying to redefine reality. And so we have a very special guest on our show today, Senator Mayes Middleton. Senator Middleton, thank you so much for being on our show today.
Thank you for having me on, Mary Elizabeth.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll introduce you to our supporters, even though so many of them know you and the great work that you do. But Senator Mayes Middleton is the Texas State Senator for District 11, which covers cities like Galveston, League City, Pearland, and Manville. Prior to serving in the Texas Senate, Senator Middleton actually served in the Texas House of Representatives. Senator Middleton has introduced and passed legislation on a variety of conservative issues, but most notably, he was the author of SB 15, the Save Women's Sports Law that was passed this legislative session to protect college women from being forced to compete against men in sports. So we're very excited to have Senator Middleton on the show today, and I will say he's very knowledgeable about the issues of federal government and federal law. He's also a licensed attorney, and so we're so excited to have him on the show to make some sense out of this nonsensical world we're in with the Title IX rewrite. So I wanted to give our listeners a little bit of background of what's going on because we have talked about it on our social media post, and our group has been pretty active on this issue. But for the past 2 years, the Biden administration has been trying to redefine sex in Title IX, which we know has historically been to make sure that women have equal opportunity in sports and education, which was its original purpose when it was passed by Congress in 1972. But in order to advance LGBT rights, the Biden administration Department of Education decided to go on this quest, I will say, that took about 2 years to redefine sex to include sexual orientation and gender identity to where it wasn't just male and female. That caused a myriad of problems, and they had about 240,000 people speak out against this issue. That slowed down the process to where it took a couple of years for them to actually get a draft. Well, they finally released that draft and that final rule a few weeks ago, and chaos ensued. So we wanted to make sure we invited a very great guest on the show to talk about this issue, who's very knowledgeable on the legalities and what's going on. So Senator Middleton, just to get us around this issue and help us understand this issue, can you share your thoughts on this redefining of sex in Title IX, and what does this mean for schools?
Yeah, it's really unfortunate. Macy and I have a 2-year-old daughter, and this is really risking not just her safety, but her future opportunity as well. And it's taking away fairness from her. And this certainly reaffirms the fact that we need to abolish the federal Department of Education. They can't seem to do anything good, and hopefully in Trump's second term we can get that done. But look, Title IX was there to protect fairness and opportunity for women, and unfortunately, Joe Biden and his cronies in Washington, D.C. want to take that away. And we had legislation this past session that passed the Texas Senate that would have prevented some of these issues, and we need to make sure that we get that done next time.
Yeah, absolutely. A lot of people talk about, why the Department of Education was created in the first place. There's a lot of history there about why we have that agency, but was a part of kind of, if I'm correct, the Great Society plan. And a lot of people are wondering, what's the use besides, them writing, a lot of these policies. So yeah, it's very interesting, that conversation about how they continue to churn out these problems and policies and have become a tainted agency.
And they're trying to hurt and indoctrinate our children. I'm sure you saw the pride flag that was on the elementary school cafeteria wall in Austin ISD. So That's the kind of thing you're going to see if we don't stop this. I mean, one of the rules in Title IX says that a school district can be held accountable, criminally accountable, for using the wrong pronoun for a child. I mean, that's just wrong. The
Yeah.
woke agenda is being forced on our kids, and it's going to hurt them. You know, it's going to hurt our next generation, which is why it's up to Texas to lead the charge to stop this and make sure that it never goes into effect. And that's why legislation like the Save Women's Sports Act is so important. We passed that last session, and it kicks men out of women's sports. That's what it does. And that was met with protests and even violence when the bill was signed into law by the governor at Texas Women's University.
Yeah, that's right. I remember that ceremony, and it's the common sense, but it's crazy how there's opposition to common sense, and we're seeing just kind of the how far the other side will go to redefine reality, and in the end, take away fairness, take away opportunities from people who've worked so hard. You got to meet Riley Gaines and work with her on the Save Women's Sports Law, and so many women like her, worked really hard and trained in their sports to be perfect at it, and to have their trophies taken out of their hands and sometimes even be injured by a male athlete,
Right.
is insane. And so that's why we're so thankful to you for, filing SB 15 and getting it across the finish line, to protect female athletes in our state. Um, Sometimes when I talk to people about, what happens at the federal level, especially with this rewrite of Title IX, and anytime you mention Biden, they're like, well, that's DC. DC's crazy. And they're like, we're good in Texas. But can you explain to our audience how this Title IX rewrite could affect them and why it's important for us to be aware and actually take action?
Well, it's going to affect all of the sons and daughters of this state, unfortunately. And, sadly, your own taxpayer money is being used to advance some of this woke agenda from Washington, D.C. Taxpayer funded lobbyists literally lobbied against the bill that would have helped prevent some of these things from happening. So, for example, Senate Bill 8 was a school choice bill, but it also included a prohibition on instruction on sexual orientation or gender ideology up to 12th grade. And it was very broad. It included activities and programs, not just instruction. And that's something that Florida did up to third grade, I think 2 years ago now. That passed the Texas Senate. It unfortunately did not pass the Texas House. And another example, Senate Bill 162. What that says is your God-given sex is your God-given sex, and you cannot change it on your birth certificate, period, the end. So those are two examples of things that could have helped prevent what Washington, D.C. is trying to force on the state of Texas to hurt the daughters and women of this state. And this is how federalism works. The federal government is a creation of the states and not the other way around. So it is up to us to fight back and make sure these things do not go into effect ever in this state.
Yeah, thanks for reminding us of those pieces of legislation. I think people forgot about how that was intertwined in the school choice bill, that
Right.
parental education and parental rights legislation that would have said, okay, no discussion of sexual orientation or gender identity should be in the classroom. K through, I think we went all the way to 12th grade, maybe?
We did. Florida
Okay,
was third grade, and we did better than that. We did 12th grade.
right. That's great. Yeah.
A
And
lot stronger. Yeah.
yeah, a lot stronger. And, very disappointing to see that bill, not make it across the finish line. And like, we see these topics not just discussed in sex ed, but they integrate it in math class and social studies. They integrate it in, different elective courses. And so, and it's from an advocacy perspective to the point where they are advocating for gender transitioning in
Right.
schools and advocating for pronoun use. But like you said, it was really disappointing to see that bill not get across the finish line. And we're hoping to bring back legislation that does give a definition to male and female and protect those, private spaces next session. So, You're absolutely right. I really appreciate your work on, taxpayer funded lobbying. I remember, starting out in this work and hearing about you working on that issue. And I was like, well, that really isn't fair. When you think about it, you pay taxes to your city government, and then the city government hires lobbyists, and then those lobbyists lobby against your interest. And we see it happening in education issues too. So it's a pervasive issue that affects so many different issues, because we did see school districts send lobbyists to the state capitol. So, yeah, it can definitely affect your issues, but we hope we can get across the finish line those particular bills next session, and have success on them. So we know how this issue obviously affects women's sports. When we think of Title IX, we think of, women's sports, being able to play in, athletics. Your colleague, Senator Colcourse, talks about, playing sports even before Title IX, and how that really helped her to be able to have the opportunity to, play golf, and be successful in sports. But Title IX affects a lot of different other issues besides women's sports. It's about education and opportunities, and, sex separated spaces. Could you talk about some of the other problems that could occur with this rewrite of Title IX, even outside or in addition to the sports issue?
Right, right. So, I don't know if everyone remembers in 2015, the Texas Senate led the charge on what was called the bathroom bill. And everyone said we were crazy and this is not a real issue. Well, here we are in 2024, and it is a real issue because they are trying to get boys into girls' bathrooms, locker rooms, and showers. And that bill would have prevented that. And it was this basic safety. That's what the federal government is pushing. That is a real consequence. Our daughters will not be safe if that is allowed and forced onto our school districts in Texas. So that was Senate Bill 3. And going back to the taxpayer-funded lobbyists, Texas Association of School Boards, which is the main taxpayer-funded lobby group for our school districts, opposed that bill and unfortunately was successful in stopping it in the Texas House. So here's a very real-world example of some of the things that could happen to the daughters of this great state. Nobody wants a man going in the bathroom with their elementary age daughter, and that can happen under this Title IX rewrite.
Yeah, it's crazy. It's such a common sense issue, and there was a lot of pushback of like, why don't you just want people to go to the bathroom? It's like, go to the bathroom, but the appropriate bathroom. And, we like to call it the Privacy Act because we know that there's a lot of pushback on calling it the bathroom bill. But, it's about protecting that basic right of privacy that even in law, Title IX says you have the right to have these sex separated restrooms, locker rooms, and showers. It's actually the law in Title IX. And so you have a right to that. It's a very common sense piece of legislation. And yes, we are seeing, like you said, real instances of boys and girls locker rooms happening in the state of Texas. And there's been a lot of trauma that's been caused to young girls who have experienced this, even in our surrounding Austin area. But like you said, the Biden administration is giving a green light and saying this is okay. And you even mentioned earlier about criminal penalties for using the wrong pronoun. I was trying to explain that to my team. Like, yes, you can face sexual harassment charges for calling someone the wrong pronoun. That's how serious some of these consequences too are in Title IX as well.
That's right. And it's one of the incredible things that the woke agenda in Washington, D.C. is trying to force on this state and hurt our sons and daughters. It's all we're saying is, look, it's your God-given sex, and do not force this onto our school districts and our children. And that is the purpose of what they're doing here with Title IX, is they're trying to force it on us. And Texas is already spoken on this. You look at the Protect Girls Sports and the Protect Women's Sports bill, that is profoundly popular both with Democrats and Republicans and independents, because everyone at the end of the day fundamentally wants fairness and they want safety. And we all understand the common sense of, look, If it's not fair, that next generation of women are not going to enter the arena at all. So it's not just things being stolen from them now and fairness and opportunity being stolen from them now. It's them choosing to not enter the arena because they know it's not fair. So that's why it's so important to pass. And back on the issue with the locker rooms, that's actually a lot of people don't realize one of the first things that drove Riley Gaines to speak out, because there was a man in the women's locker room and she was outraged. She did not feel safe or comfortable, and neither did her teammates. And she was the one to stand up and say, this is not right and we need to stop it.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. I mean, she talks about, I think even one swimmer decided to go change in a broom closet. And think about how ridiculous that is to, you have a right to have, your own changing space, and you feel forced to go into a broom closet before you're having to compete in a competition. And yeah, it's common sense and it's fairness. And you're absolutely right. I was listening to a podcast earlier with Jennifer Say, who's someone who left the Levi company over, their woke policies. And she basically expressed that, yes, if we don't do something with laws, which I'm glad Texas has addressed this issue, women's sports would be completely gone. She said it'll just be filled with men in the women category. You have women who will stop competing, and then so many men will just enter that category and take it over. So that's a very true concern that we saw in Texas, that we glad we have legislation on, but we need to continue to fight, especially at the national level. And we're thankful for what the NAIA did recently. And we have about 13 to 14 schools in Texas that are a part of that sports association, and they took a bold stand saying no one in their conference will be forced to compete against males. So they're taking the right stand on that issue, but still work to be done. So recently, the Attorney General, Kim Paxton, filed a lawsuit against the Department of Education, and Governor Abbott has directed both the TEA and Texas universities to ignore the new rule on Title IX. So do you have any plans as a legislator to take any actions yourself?
Well, I applaud our governor and our attorney general in fighting back. We have to. We owe it to our sons and daughters of this state to do that. But then some of the legislation that has undone from previous sessions where we have passed it in the Senate before, we need to get done next time, like making sure that your God-given sex is what's on your birth certificate. You cannot change your sex on your birth certificate. Also making sure that we do not provide any instruction or activities or guidance or anything related to sexual orientation or gender ideology all the way till 12th grade that is inappropriate for our children. And then, we also need to make sure that we protect our next generation and, their safety in the public schools, where they're not forced to go in a bathroom with someone that's of the opposite sex. They need to make sure that we have that safety for all the daughters of this state. So those are just a few examples. I mean, the fight goes on, but at the end of the day, what they're trying to do is they're trying to force it on us. We're a parental rights state, and unfortunately, the heavy hand of the federal government is trying to tell us what to do against the wishes of Texas parents.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I know that your time with us is coming to close to an end, but we really want to thank you for being on the show today. And you have such great expert knowledge on this issue, and we definitely want to be working with you on the issues that you want to address in the next legislative session to combat what's happening with the rewrite of Title IX.
Thank you for having me on today. Texas Values has been a great partner to fight for faith, family, and freedom legislation in your Texas capital. So,
all right. Thank you so much, Senator Middleton.
Thank you.
All right, we have a few minutes left. I think this was a great conversation with Senator Middleton. He's actually been keeping up a lot with issues related to the Save Women's Sports since its passage and the signing ceremony that we had last year. His office was actually on top of an incident in East Texas where they wanted to investigate and ask the university about a male player who might possibly be on a women's team there. That issue resolved itself, and so we're happy that our law is effective and that even some people are self-regulating. So I believe that male athletes self-regulated and moved to another state once we passed our Save Women's Sports law. But recently, last week, in Senator Middleton's neck of the woods, College Bryan Station, we actually almost had our very first, real incident of a male coming to compete against female athletes on a Texas campus against a Texas team. You probably saw our press release about this. There was a University of Michigan water polo player, 31 years old, playing on the undergraduate club water polo team, who was traveling with the University of Michigan to the campus at Texas A&M for a national championship. And the very first match he would play would be against women at Texas State University. So there you go, with a double violation of being on a Texas campus, playing a Texas team. Thankfully, to so many efforts of people, I want to thank my good friends at Icons, Kim Jones and Marshy Smith, for alerting me about this issue and making me aware, making our team aware. And we were able to at least put some pressure and some action on it. I'm thankful for our elected officials for even being aware of this issue. And the male guy actually benched himself, and so he didn't travel to Texas. An issue was saved. Also want to thank the Young Women of America, for America, which is a younger version of CWA. They have a campus chapter at Texas A&M, and they were on the offense, ready to protest if this man were to show up to compete at the competition. But we're thankful that that issue was stopped. It's a victory. And like we said, laws also regulate, but they also deter. And we're glad that people recognize the laws in our state and that they recognize that we stand for protecting women in sports. So we're very happy about that victory, and very happy that we have laws like the Save Women's Sports law, and that we're protecting women at all levels. So it's been a big week, fighting the Biden administration, fighting issues on gender identities. So earlier this week, we did have Attorney General Kim Paxton, like I discussed earlier, file a lawsuit against the Department of Education for their rewrite of Title IX. This is big. I believe we're about up to 8 states that have had attorneys general actually file lawsuits against the Biden administration. So we're glad to be in that mix and to actually stand up against that administration, because clearly what they're doing is something they do not have the power to do. As Senator Middleton explained, the Department of Education is an agency. They can interpret laws, but they cannot write laws. They don't have the power to make laws like Congress. And clearly this is an incorrect interpretation, because it's very clear in Title IX that the definition of sex is male and female, and the very clear congressional intent of Title IX is obviously to protect women and make sure they have equal opportunities in education and sports and have that right to sex separated facilities. So this rewrite is all wrong on principle and all wrong on legalities as well. So we're very happy that we have that lawsuit in the state of Texas against the Biden administration. But we also have our governor who took a bold stand and said to the Texas Education Agency that K through 12 schools should just completely ignore this rewrite, which I agree, they should just ignore it. And also later this week, he actually wrote colleges and universities a letter telling them that they should also ignore the rewrite of Title IX. And I think it's important for us to know that Title IX affects K through 12 and both colleges, so we're happy that our governor is also taking a stand. But continuing on this train of gender identity activism, we saw last week the Austin City Council decided that they would create a resolution like they always do. It's very common and pretty routine that every time the Texas legislature passes something on a social issue, that they create some kind of resolution saying, we don't believe in that and we're going to ignore that. They did that in 2019 in response to SB 22, which was a law preventing government funds to abortion providers. They did that in 2021 whenever the heartbeat law was passed. They did it again in a big way in 2022 with the Grace Act, which was after the Dobbs decision overturning Roe versus Wade, saying that they would insulate themselves from enforcing our pre-Roe statutes. And so, as routinely as we expect them to do, they decided to do one on the gender identity issue. And so they wanted to insulate themselves from SB 14, but oddly enough, they're not the ones who enforce SB 14. Neither does the district attorney, Jose Garza, or any of the police in the city of Austin. So it was a little off base. Really doesn't do anything, but at the same time just shows how extreme Austin City Council is, because they really care about saying that they're against protecting kids from these harmful transitions. So if you want to know more about that, please visit txvalues.org. Again, if you find value in the work that we do, attend our policy forum September 13th and 14th. Visit our booth at the state convention. Again, like our Facebook page, and always visit txvalues.org. We appreciate all of your donations and support, and continue to support us in our fight for faith, family, and freedom. Until next time, this has been the Texas Values Report with Mary Elizabeth Castle. Thank you so much for listening, and I hope you have an excellent weekend.